I was scrolling through pictures of joinery on Pinterest, as one does, and I came across this joint from Peter Sealand, and at first glance I had no idea what was going on here, and it looked really intriguing to me. But then I stared at it for a few minutes, and I realized that if you break it down, it could actually be a pretty simple joint, so follow along as I try to figure it out. Okay, so let's break it down. So the first thing that I noticed about this joint was that these pieces were not squares, they were actually rectangles. So if you see the piece on the left, the top part is wider and the edge is narrow. The piece on the right is the opposite. Then I looked at the exposed joints to try to see where they're coming from, and I noticed that each piece has two, what I'm going to call exposed tenons. And it looked like they were half the thickness of the material, and it was divided into thirds, creating two exposed tenons on either side. So I played around on SketchUp and figured out that if I start off with a piece that's 1.5 times as wide as it is thick, I could split that piece in half and then split it up again into thirds, creating this joint. So this works out on paper. Let's see if it works out in the shop. I milled up this piece of 8/4 ash to an 1 3/4 inch thick. And according to my SketchUp drawing, in order for this joint to work, I need to rip it into strips that are 1.5 times as wide as that. So that's 2 5/8. Now I have 3 boards here that are ready for joinery. They are 1.5 times as wide as they are thick. So I think the first logical step here would be to do the half lap sort of joint. To do that, I'm going to split the board thickness-wise here into half, and then going down, I'm going to use the other piece as a referential measurement, and I'm going to cut it the thickness-wise, not width-wise. This is a little center finding square. It has 2 pegs. You put it around your piece, and you put it on an angle so it gets the center. Put your pencil in the hole and draw a line. Now I have the center marked out, so that's as high as I'm going to cut. Now I'm going to use the other board as a referential measurement for where to end that cut. Now I'll set the blade to that halfway mark that was in the middle of the board, creating the half lap. I guess now we know sort of what kind of joint we could call it. And I'll line up the thickness of the material up with the blade, and I'll set my stop block in position. Just note, I'm using a flat tooth blade here, which is going to leave a cleaner cut. And before I cut the other pieces, let me just see if I had the stop block in the correct position. It's a little bit proud, but I think that's okay. So now I'm going to go and cut the same exact half lap on the other pieces. All right, that was easy enough, just like making a half lap. So the next step, I'm going to create the 2 outer tenons, and I'm going to split up the board into thirds. This is 2 5/8, so that divided by 3 is 7/8. So each tenon and the gap in the middle will be 7/8. And as far as the depth, I want it to go, I believe, this way. Yeah, okay. Yeah, because the pieces are going to mate like that. Okay, cool. So to do this, I'm gonna take it over to the table saw again. Technically, I could just clamp it onto my crosscut sled and cut it like this, but my blade doesn't go high enough to make that cut. So instead, I'm going to use this tenoning jig that I made. So I want to remove this center over here, creating the 2 tenons on the end. I guess now I'm making what seems like a bridle joint. Guess there's another hint to what we could call this joint. I'm just going to lower the blade up until that cut line that I marked out earlier. I'm going to clamp the workpiece onto my jig, and I'm going to line up the blade with the inside of that cut line. It looks like I need to adjust my blade height, so I'm going to raise the blade just slightly and do that again. Now I'm just going to flip the piece over to make the same cut on the opposite side of the piece. And after making these same 2 outer cuts on all 3 of the pieces, now I'm just going to clean out the middle of all the pieces. Okay, so now let's see how it all fits together. So I guess it's just kind of going to be like a puzzle trying to figure this out. Let me do this one. Makes sense. All right, that locks in there. And this one. Oh yeah. That was super cool. So I love how this joint seemed like it was so complicated, but it was actually super simple, just 2 cuts, but we're not done yet. There was one piece that was confusing me, this center piece, the center triangle, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And after looking at Peter Seeland's other work, there are some pieces where that little triangle isn't there, like in this one. So I realized that this triangle was just a square that is glued in after the fact. So I ripped up a piece that is 7/8 on both sides and then just cut it to fit into there. And now, oops, I'm going to glue this all up, and then I'm going to figure out some sort of way to cut off this corner to create that cool triangle effect that he has going on there. Still don't know how I'm going to do that yet, but I have some time while the glue dries. It's a lot of surface area. This is probably going to be a really strong joint. I can't remember how they go. Okay. No, this goes like that. One of them goes like that. It's totally like this. Okay. There we go. And this one goes like that. Alright, now I'll just glue this little piece in. And clamp it all up. So I have 3 clamps that are putting pressure on that center block in the middle there. Now I'm going to add some more onto either end. All right, hope that works. Looks really cool from the inside. Set that off to dry. All right, it's been setting overnight. Let's take it out of the clamps. All right, very cool. I'm going to figure out how to cut that angle now. So from the picture, it just seems like the lines are connected from the corners like that. So now a triangle is marked out on here. I think I'll just cut it with a handsaw. So I just sanded it up and the joints are a little bit gappy, so I'm going to try to fill it in with some sawdust and glue. I don't have any ash dust, but I have white oak dust. We're going to see if that's going to be a good enough match. And after some sanding and some finish, here is the final joint. I really have no idea what I would call something like this, and I really don't know who created this joint and where this came from. Peter Seeland was the only place where I've seen it done, so maybe he came up with this. I really have no idea. But maybe there was a half lap involved, there was bridle joints involved, but there's kind of like through tendons going on here and triangles. I really don't know what I would call this. So what would you call this joint? I'm curious to know what you guys would think. So I don't think that I have any projects coming up where I'm going to be using this joint. This was just a fun experiment to figure out, to see if I can recreate something that I've seen online. And I think I did it. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. And obviously, if you want to do something like this, you don't need power tools. You could do this with hand tools just as well if that's what you like to do. So thank you guys again so much for watching. Happy New Year, happy holidays, and I'll see you in 2020 with some more projects. This is what happens when I put the heater on.